Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us for our live Hangout on Air for the Google Partners community. I'm Ross Tucker. I'm one of the community managers for Google Partners, and today I'm pleased to introduce one of our expert panelists, Frederick Valles, who's going to be talking to us today about how to handle clients who object to using AdWords. Frederick is going to tell us how to address some common concerns, whether it's helping a client get started with online advertising or whether it's addressing concerns about working with an agency. Frederick, thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Ross.
Of course. So before we begin, I just want to give a little bit of background about Frederick's experience in the industry. Frederick was actually one of the first 500 employees at Google, where he spent 10 years building AdWords and teaching advertisers how to get the most out of the platform. As Google's chief AdWords evangelist, Frederick helped create AdWords conversion tracking, which is a very useful utility, and he was a founding member of the AdWords editor team. Today, Frederick runs an AdWords tool company called Optimizer, which makes optimizing AdWords much more simple. And through his agency, Top Tier Marketing, Frederick is also able to improve performance for clients, no matter what size their business is. Frederick blogs monthly for Search Engine Land, is a frequent speaker at SES, PubCon, and other search conferences. I'm going to hand it over to Frederick now to walk us through his presentation, but as a reminder, keep in mind that you can send in your questions on our Google Plus event page for this Hangout, and that we'll also be collecting your feedback at the end of our live Hangout on Air. Thank you, Frederick.
Thank you, Ross. So hello, everyone. My name is Frederick Valles, and today in the Partners Hangout, we're going to be talking about objection handling. Last week, there was a Hangout, and that one was more about how do you handle your existing clients. And this week, we'll talk about how do you get more clients. I'm sure you guys all go out there as agencies and you talk to folks, and some of them are hesitant about committing to PPC, about committing to AdWords. And there's some common objections that you get all the time. So really want to go through some of those. But first of all, my name is Frederick Valles, so Ross gave a great introduction there. And I spent 10 years at Google. The last 2 years, I've been working for myself, and I have my own agency. But in those 12 years, I've really been to lots and lots of client meetings. So even when I was at Google, I would meet with the very largest clients that Google had, the very largest clients that AdWords had. And so they were pretty sophisticated, but they still had some objections. And so for me, it wasn't necessarily always about selling them on the fact that they should be doing AdWords in the first place, but getting them to understand maybe things like quality score, maybe getting them bought into doing conversion tracking and sharing that data with Google to have better results. And so what I want to bring to this presentation today is really give you my insights about those types of questions that people might have, and use my experience as an agency, as someone who's been in your shoes, who's currently in your shoes, and tell you how I get more customers for my business. And when I was working at Google, how I convinced people that what Google was doing was the right thing. But also, I'm not currently a Googler anymore, so I think that gives me that nice dual perspective and lets me talk to you as a peer, as opposed to someone who's, just to tell you from Google's perspective what they think. I'm actually out there like you, having to do this every day. So to get the ball rolling, I've put together a list of 10 common objections that I hear. Now, I'm really looking to your questions, and I've already seen a couple of questions on the community. I keep answering or keep asking those questions there, but also keep answering the people's questions, right? I have one perspective on all of this. I want to hear your perspective too. So if I cover a point and you say, hey, the way that I really address that is such and so, do put that on the community as well so we can all learn from each other. But these top 10 concerns are ones that I've heard, and they deal both with the market and the industry and AdWords in general. And then I'll also have a few that deal with people who might be hesitant to be working with agencies in the first place. So now the other point I want to make here is I did a Hangout a couple of weeks ago. It was about automation, AdWords scripts, and that was a very advanced one, right? That was stuff that many of you may have heard about AdWords scripts, but probably not many of you were doing it yet. So, so this, on the other hand, I'm kind of going to be preaching to the choir. Everything I'm going to say here, you probably already know. And just understand, the point of this presentation today is not for me to convince you to do advertising, but it's about how I handle those questions with advertisers. And so when I was working at Google, we had these weekly trainings. And even if it was a topic that I knew very well, I still find it very helpful to go in and hear the trainer, in those cases, really verbalize the answers. And it gave me a different perspective on how someone would take some of the existing metrics, the existing data points, and put those together into a story that I could use for my customers back when I worked at Google, And so hopefully we're doing the same here today, right? I'm just going to be verbalizing the things that you already know, but maybe you can take some of those points to your customers and your prospects and grow your business that way. So let's jump into it. First, the 7 key objections that I hear that are related to AdWords and the market. So these are things from it's too competitive, it's too expensive, I'm too late to the game, I don't get good results, I haven't seen good results in the past, I don't believe in online advertising. You know, that's a crazy one, but people do still believe that sometimes. And so I'm going to be covering those first. So number 1 objection, my customers don't buy online. Now, if you're probably not getting this from someone who's already come to you and said they want to work with your agency to do online marketing, but you're probably doing some networking to grow your business. So if you go out to a cocktail party one day and somebody comes to you and says, oh, that's pretty cool, you're an agency, but I don't believe in online marketing because my customers are not online. Well, a big stat that we had at Google that I've been using for the past 3 years at these events called Getting Your Business Online, where we've gone to all the different states and we've worked with small, medium businesses to get their businesses online, is this big number here. 97% of consumers go online to research purchases. Now, what's interesting about this stat is it's not saying that 97% of people who buy something online go and research it before they purchase it. It's 97% of people who are looking to buy something in general, right? So if somebody's looking to buy a fridge and they're going to go to the local store and put that fridge in the back of their pickup truck and drive it home, those people are researching that online. And those same people, they might be researching online about insurance for the truck, right? So whether it's a product or a service, even if those things are not bought on the internet, people go online to make sure they're getting a great deal, to make sure they're working with a reputable company, that they're going to have a good guarantee, warranty, return policy, all of those things, right? So people massively go online and they use search engines to research what it is they're going to do. So it's unlikely with these kinds of numbers that there's anyone out there who truly has none of their customers looking for them on the internet. Now, that's a big stat here, right? But let me take it to the level of your actual customer. So if you just throw a number at them, like 97% of people search online, that's a cool number. But let's make it a little bit more real. Let's put some numbers behind that for their specific industry. And so what I like to use is Google Trends. I'm sure you've all seen Google Trends, but you can put in any number of keywords. Actually, you can put in a limited number of keywords, and then it will show you what is the relative frequency that these keywords get searched for on Google. Now, I also like to use the keyword planner inside of AdWords to put some actual numbers against that. So in this example, you can see here, it's for a plumbing business, right? So we're looking at keywords like leak detection, drain cleaning, and faucet installation. It shows you that relative to each other, leak detection is a much more frequently searched for topic. But so even in a category, if that plumber says, well, not a lot of people look for faucet installation, you can take these numbers, these charts to them, and you can say, well, even though that's the case, there's other services that you perform that people do look for in much larger numbers. And so you can then go to the keyword planner, put in those same keywords, and now you get actual numbers of monthly searches for this. The reason that the keyword planner, you guys can use that, right? So you can log into it, but you can no longer log into it if you're not logged into AdWords. So that's why I like Google Trends, because it's something that you can even tell your prospective customer. You can say, go put in this URL into your browser and just type in your own keywords and see what comes out of it. So it's something they can play with to really get to that comfort level that what you're selling to them actually makes sense for their business. So if you look deeper at Google Trends, it not only shows you the relative search volume globally or nationally, but you can take it down to a regional level. So here the example is faucet installation. So we're still on the example of maybe trying to sell to a plumbing company. And the bluer the map area is, the more frequently people search for that terminology in those states, so relative to the average. So it shows you that on the two coasts, people don't seem to be that handy maybe, right? Because they don't know how to install their own faucets. Whereas in the middle of the country and in a place like Nevada, it's not quite as common of a search. So this is still good information, right? Now, if somebody comes to you and says, well, you know, maybe people here where I live don't really search for that topic very much, you can show them that perhaps in other states, in other cities, it's much more common for that search to happen. And so then you can figure out with them, maybe it's a new market opportunity. Maybe you can expand from where you currently are and start offering these services where people are much more interested in what it is that you're selling. And this is another thing that people, your prospective customers, can look at themselves. Now, objection number 2, you sold them on online advertising, but then somebody says, well, hey, what? I don't care about clicks. I don't want to have visits to my website. Maybe I even have a crappy website and I don't want people to see it. I just want to get phone calls to my business. Now, that's a pretty common one that I hear all the time. And so I have a number of customers who care more about phone calls. And the good news is I've seen in plenty of cases where my ads generate the majority of interactions just on the ad themselves. So customers will actually call directly from the ad as opposed to click to the website and then do something. And that's pretty common, right? I mean, a lot of smaller companies don't necessarily have the best websites. And in some cases, if you're looking at making a reservation for something, hiring a plumber, finding a lawyer, really what you want to do is you just want to talk to these people. You don't want to necessarily fill out a form on the internet. And so the stat here is that 70% of mobile searchers have done click to call without even going to the website. So people, when they see the ad and they find a provider that they think they like, they will actually call up that person. So there's a lot of phone calls going through the system, going through AdWords. And in fact, the other stat on there is that over 40 million calls happen in this way on a monthly basis on Google AdWords. So even if your customer cares about calls much more than clicks, Google AdWords still has that solution for them. Now, again, let's make that more real, right? I've just given you an industry-level stat, but how about looking at your own data? So recently, with the introduction of call extensions in enhanced campaigns, you can now use Google Voice to establish the call to your customer. And the nice thing that this does is because Google Voice is establishing the call, they know first, does the call actually connect? And secondly, they know how long that call lasts. So now you can say, if that call lasts more than 60 seconds, then we're going to count it as a conversion. And so up until today, that's gone into a column that's called call conversions. But great news, Google AdWords is going to start including those conversions in the regular conversion column starting in November. And the reason I think that's great news is because now myself and you all can use these conversions to do bid management. Right? So if you're using conversion optimizer or flexible bid strategies, now you can actually look at these calls that happen directly from the ad and start placing bids based on those results. So that's call extensions. Definitely recommend you enable those and use the Google Voice methodology. One little caveat, by the way, is that if you use Google Voice, they tend to use a lot of 800 numbers. Actually, not even 800, but like 855, 866 type numbers. And some of my customers have found that they're more successful showing a local number next to their ad. And so do some tests for yourselves, for your different customers, and see if it makes more sense to maybe not use the Google Voice methodology, but still get those calls directly from the ads by placing the local number for the business into a call extension. Okay, so that's tracking calls before the customer even goes to the website. That's what I tell my potential advertisers. And so, but secondly, if people do go to the website, there's still a large number of calls that happen. And you want to be tracking those as well. Currently, there's no solution in AdWords that does this. So I have to rely on third parties like Mongoose Metrics, Log My Calls, If by Phone. There's a bunch of others. And what they do is they give you a bank of numbers, and then you can, they will dynamically rotate through those numbers on your website. And so they will, because they have that bank of numbers, they can actually associate a specific number to a specific search that happened on Google. So they can say, oh, if a call came into this phone number, it was for this keyword and this ad and this particular click. And so now they log that call. If that call is longer than a certain amount of time, they can feed it back into Google Analytics as a conversion, as a goal event. And then if you've linked your Google Analytics to your Google AdWords, you can start seeing those calls as conversions. So now you got the whole picture, right? Now you know how many people have called you from the ad directly, and you also know how many calls come once the user is on your website. You know exactly which keywords that was for, so you're able to use that to do better bidding. So bottom line, if anyone cares about calls, there's lots of them on Google AdWords, and it's definitely something that you can help your customers with. Okay. Concern number 3, objection number 3, is they come to you and they say, I already have pretty good organic results, so I don't really care that much about being on paid advertising, paying for an ad. And so a couple of stats that Google pulled around this is that 81% of ad impressions and 66% of clicks happen in the absence of a related organic result. So what this is saying is these clicks would not have happened, these ad impressions would not have happened if you weren't advertising, right? Because there was no organic result on those pages. So these are fully incremental. Now, that's not exactly what your customer said. Your customer said, I have good organic rankings. I don't think I'm going to get more clicks from this. Well, it turns out there's actually kind of a halo effect. And it's kind of like 1 + 1 isn't equal to 2, but it's equal to 3. By running ads and organic at the same time, there's this funny thing that happens in people's minds. And keep in mind, most people don't understand why things are on the Google search results page, right? So they may not even really distinguish between an ad and an organic result. And now you have two listings on that page. You have an ad and you have an organic result. And in the minds of those consumers, they say, oh, this must be a really good company because they're on there twice. I'm going to trust them with my business as opposed to someone else. And that's kind of where you get that halo effect. And then if you look at the other stats on this slide here, you can see that it depends on how good your organic position is in terms of how many clicks you can get additionally by running a pay-per-click campaign as well. So if you have the top organic result, you can expect about 50% incremental clicks from running ads as well. But if you're down in positions 5 or lower on that first page of results, it's a 96% incremental lift in clicks. So these are 96% of clicks you would not have gotten if you did not run an ad. And so that's saying these people would not have clicked on your organic result even though you had one, but they did click on the ad because you had an ad. So that's, again, a pretty powerful stat right there that says PPC in combination with SEO does work really, really well. Now, let me, again, make it a little bit more specific for your verticals and your industries. So take a look at this slide. This is for mobile, but it's kind of making the same point that no matter what vertical, no matter what industry, there seem to be at least 80% incremental clicks for mobile searches by running ads in addition to having a good SEO result. So I'll give you a minute to look for your verticals, your industries that you work with, and copy down that information. And let me tell another story. So eBay did a piece of research as well. And the question for eBay was, I mean, obviously they rank really highly on the keyword eBay, on the search for eBay. And they wanted to understand, does it actually matter for us to also buy an ad for that keyword? And they did a massively complex piece of research that took a month to do, several levels of regression, complicated stuff that I certainly don't really understand fully because I'm not a statistician, and I bet most of you don't fully understand it. But the bottom line and what they came away with was the fact that it really depended how useful those paid ads were, depending on how often that customer had worked with eBay in the past. So they found that someone who'd been to eBay maybe 1 or twice in the past year, they would still benefit from seeing an ad. And the reason for that was that eBay was controlling the message. Unlike an organic result, in a paid result, you determine what the ad text says. You can put in site links. You're in control. And so eBay found that people who'd been to their site once or twice, they kind of knew what eBay was about, but they didn't understand the full value proposition. So maybe they didn't realize there was a buy it now type functionality. And by buying ads, they could highlight those value propositions and really get those light eBay users to better understand the product and do more business with them. On the flip side, they found that people who came to eBay on a monthly basis, for them there wasn't that much value in seeing a paid ad. So in those cases, they would rather not advertise on their own keyword and have people click on the organic result. But kind of the bottom line from this one is eBay is a big company, eBay is a big brand, and even they found that there was additional value in having those paid ads in addition to the organic results. So if that's the case for eBay, chances are it's going to be the case for your customers as well, because I bet most of them don't quite have that brand recognition that a company like eBay does. So let's go one level deeper even here, and let's take a look at what specifically you've seen for your customers, or if that customer has said, okay, fine, we're going to do AdWords, you can still show to them what the impact is of running ads in conjunction with having a good organic result. This is a report that's relatively new in AdWords. It's called the Paid and Organic Dimension Report. So you can find this under your Dimensions tab in AdWords, and then you select Paid and Organic. You have to connect your Google Webmaster account to your Google AdWords account. Once you do that, it'll start pulling in the data from the queries. And now, as you can see in this slide here, and I'll zoom in on that a bit, but it will tell you for each query what the stats were when only an ad was shown, when only an organic result was shown, or when both of those were shown. And now, as you can see in this example, there's not a lot of data in this example, so take it with a grain of salt, but I just want to make the point that this data exists. So you can see that if both were shown, they got 1 click for 5 impressions. So that was a pretty good click-through rate. When only the ad was shown, they only got 1 click for 15 impressions. So the CTR was lower. So again, it kind of illustrates the fact that there's a halo effect between having both an ad and an organic result on those pages, on those search results pages. So you can really use this data to hammer home the point that this does make sense. All right, this is a big one, right? I bet a lot of you get this. A potential customer comes to you and says, I've tried it before, but you know what? It didn't work for me. The ROI wasn't there, the results weren't good. And that's when you as an agency, you really have to step in and explain what your process is. And you have to remind that customer that it's not because they tried it in the past or another agency tried it that you're not going to be successful. Because at the end of the day, in AdWords, you control virtually everything. You pick the keywords, you pick the targeting, you pick the CPC, you pick the budget, you pick the ad message, you pick the landing page, right? That's as much control as anyone will give you on the internet. So if you can't make that work somehow, then you probably have a problem with your business. Right? If you can't convince people when you control everything to buy something from you, there might be an underlying issue with your business. Now, a good example to me was when the display network came out for Google, a lot of advertisers complained and they said, you know, this is junk traffic. We don't like it. It's not giving us results. But that's kind of a crazy statement because, yeah, maybe some of it is not that good in terms of traffic, but Google tells you where the ad showed. Google lets you set the bid, so if you find it's only converting at 20% of what search results are converting at, well, then you set a bid that's 5 times lower. That's 20%, right? You control that bid. So if you're looking for a positive ROI, you have that control. And so what you do as an agency is you say, listen, we know how to do these things. We know how to get you good results because we can control all these things, and we know how to test for it. So that's an argument there that you can make along that point. Objection number 5. This one is saying my big competitors will always do better. And that's kind of the underlying concern that some advertisers have, is that they're too late to the game, right? There's so many advertisers on AdWords. There's big companies on there. Who am I as a smaller company to really still have good results on that? And so the way that I usually address that is by explaining how Google ranks ads on the Google search results pages. A lot of people don't understand this. And again, to you and me, it's obvious that it's a factor of cost per click, also a factor of quality score, and as of last week, it's also a factor now of ad extensions. But most people don't realize this. They don't even know how an ad goes onto Google. So they think it's all about money, right? And if it really was all about money, then yeah, they have a good point. It's probably going to be hard to compete against some multinational that has millions of dollars in budget, but that's not how it works. It's a matter of the maximum cost per click as well as the relevance of the ad as measured by quality score. And really, that's what made AdWords so beautiful in the beginning, is that all of these smaller players, they were able to come in, they were able to write better ad text, have better keywords. They spent more time on their AdWords campaigns because they knew they had to fight pretty big competitors. And so by making those more relevant ads, they got better results at a cheaper cost. And so another thing a lot of people don't realize, and tell this to your prospective customers, but the top ad on Google does not necessarily pay a higher cost per click than the second one. So you can actually pay less for the top position on Google because you've done an amazing job with quality score. And that's where I come in as an agency. That's where you come in as agencies. We know how to optimize quality score. We know how to build good ad groups that are tightly structured, that have a good CTR, that will boost our rankings at no additional cost necessarily, right? So that's what I would say to someone who says, I'm too late to the game, it's going to be too expensive. The other thing is let them know they can target specifically to their area. So this concern is a little bit more about budget as opposed to the actual cost per click. But they might say, well, listen, I'm a small operator. I maybe only have $100 daily budget. How do I compete with someone who's got thousands of dollars of daily budget? Well, remind them that the Google budget system will take any level of budget that they have and they will spread it throughout the day. So, so what you should do is you should absolutely target only the service area or the area where people are likely to buy something from you. We had a great case study many years back, and this was Happy Hounds. And so they started advertising in the beginning on AdWords, and they were targeting the whole state of California for doggy daycare. But they only had one location, right? So the whole state of California was far too big for them. And so they started getting these calls from people who would never drive 6 hours from LA to Oakland to drop their dog off at daycare, right? That didn't make sense. But then they figured out, oh, these results are not good, but we've been targeting too broadly. So let's retarget. Let's just show ads to people in a 10, 15-mile radius of where our business is. And all of a sudden, the results became really great. And their budget was tiny compared to someone who maybe did this on a national level, but they got good results because they were spending the money where their customers were physically located, and that's absolutely possible with AdWords. Now, the next concern is it's too expensive, right? Maybe the ROI isn't there. And so again, remind them, this is for all budgets. You don't have to have a huge budget to start trying it. And in fact, many customers, when they come to me, they're sort of hesitant. They say, well, we trust that you can do a good job, but until we know, we're not comfortable putting a lot of money into this. And so the example that I give is the one you can see on the right-hand side of this slide. We just say, well, let's start with a conservative budget, right? $1,000, or it could be $100. Take whatever budget you have. And then we figure out what is a click going to cost. How many clicks is that going to give you? So this $1,000 gives you 2,000 clicks at 50 cents each. And then we look in our other accounts, and we say, okay, for your industry, we think we can get you an average conversion rate of 10%, 5%, 20%, whatever it is. You apply that to the number of clicks, and now you say, okay, this is going to give you 200 new leads. So $1,000 for 200 leads means each one costs you $5. But if you value that lead at $50 based on what you know about your average sale, about the value of an average customer, you now know that your $1,000 investment actually gave you $10,000 worth of new leads. And what you do is you take that $9,000 that you just made and you pump it back into AdWords. Right? This is a pretty nice example, right? If you spend $1,000 and you make $9,000 in return, that's not necessarily going to be the case for everyone. But you make the example here that you're going to be able to reinvest your profits into AdWords, so you don't have to start with the full budget. So that's how I handle it being too expensive. Now, the last concern that I have here about the industry is that people are concerned their budget is going to be eaten up by competitors clicking on ads. Now, obviously, that would be a big problem for Google. If Google was only getting these clicks from competitors and the advertisers were not getting good results, then those advertisers would not continue to spend money with AdWords. That's obviously not the case. If you look at the earnings reports for Google, you see that a lot of people spend a lot of money on advertising, so something must be working. And Google has every incentive to make sure that it continues to work. So for years now, they've been doing really hard work, had some of the best people working on detecting invalid clicks. And what they do is they even make those invalid clicks available in reports. So you can log into AdWords and you can see how many invalid clicks you got for each of your ads. And then you can show that to your advertisers, right? And you can say, listen, this is what Google does. You can also explain that they detect invalid clicks on a short-term and a long-term basis. So if somebody's sitting there at their computer and clicking 10 times in a minute, Google detects that. But if somebody comes to your ad once a day for 30 days and clicks it once a day, Google will catch that too. But because it's a longer-term behavior, they may look at that retroactively. So those clicks you may be billed for, and then Google will refund it to you when they run that cycle where they detect sort of the longer-term invalid click behavior. Now, the way that Google does this is pretty sophisticated. And next week, a lot of us have elections, right? And think about the elections. The way that the government looks at are the election results, do they seem valid, is because they expect a certain number of votes to come from California, a certain number of votes from New York. And if you saw the same number of votes coming from every state, that would be sort of weird, right? Because not the same number of people live in all the states. And so the government can detect something invalid, something fishy happening based on those types of stats. Well, Google does the same thing. Google knows where its users are based. And so it says, well, for this ad, we expect this many clicks from this region and this many from that region. And the moment something looks out of order in that, they start finding invalid clicks. Now, Google has a lot more information. They understand what kind of browsers people use. They understand what kind of screen resolutions they have. They understand a whole lot of stuff about that specific setup. And they can use all that data that nobody else has access to to detect invalid clicks. So it's really sophisticated, and it's really, really hard for someone to get around. In fact, Google did a study a couple of years ago, and they found that 1 in 10,000 clicks was deemed to be invalid, and that they weren't really catching. So, but that's 1 in 10,000 clicks that's being clicked by a competitor, where Google's not proactively issuing a credit or refunding that amount. So, so that system works really, really well. Okay, let me shift to 3 key objections related to working with an agency. The first one is, and I hate this one, but people say, I can manage it myself. Or even worse, they say, well, you know, I got my 16-year-old nephew. He seems to be pretty good with computers. I'm sure he can figure out this AdWords thing, right? Well, if your toilet backs up at your place of business, is your 16-year-old nephew also coming in to fix that? No, because they don't have expertise in that, right? That's why you hire a plumber. If you're going to do your taxes, you hire an accountant. Why do you hire an accountant? For 2 reasons. You're going to save money, because you're not going to spend hours and hours learning the whole tax code, and that accountant probably knows all the deductions, right? So it's going to save you money by going with a professional. Same thing with AdWords. And in fact, I would argue that AdWords and online advertising changes more quickly than certainly plumbing, probably faster than the tax code. So you and me, we have expertise. We spend a lot of our days learning about AdWords. We find out about a new feature. I mean, look on the Inside AdWords blog. How many new features have been announced, or how many changes in the last week? Probably 2 or 3. And so these are all things that we have to go back. We have to figure out, how does that apply to our customers? Let's run some experiments. Let's see if these are better results. And then we can apply it to all of our other customers. And that's the other point, by the way. We work with other people in the same vertical, other people who may have similar setups. They may be direct response type advertisers. They may have different goals. And so learnings that we have as agencies, we can apply to all of these other accounts. So we're more effective at managing those accounts, and we're better able to give you the full value that you should have as an advertiser. So concern number 2 then is, they may have worked with an agency that really left them in the dark, that didn't share information. I think this kind of goes to agency management now, and you hopefully give your customers access to their accounts. I hear horrible stories sometimes from people who've been advertising with AdWords for 6, 7 years, and all of a sudden the results start going down, and they ask their agency, and the agency says, well, sorry, you can't see the account, and if you don't want to work with us anymore, we're going to keep the account. So when they go to a new agency now, they're kind of stuck, right? They have to start from scratch. All of that good quality score history, all of the good data they've built up, it's all lost. So as agencies, I believe we do have to share accounts with our customers, and definitely have 1 account per customer, so that you are able to give them access to that without then exposing data about all of your other customers. It also just makes sense to have 1 account per customer from a budget perspective, and many other reasons. So secondly, set up scheduled email reporting, right? Even if I give a customer access to AdWords, in fact, I think in 0% of cases do they actually log into the accounts, even if I give them access. But they need to have access, right? So I'm not saying don't give them access. It's just they don't really log in, because that's too much information for them. They don't want to learn the AdWords interface. What they want is a monthly, a weekly email report that says, here's how many clicks you got, here's how many conversions, and here's how much money you spent. And so they can look and feel confident that you're delivering value for their business. And then third, for those people who do occasionally want to look at real-time data as opposed to maybe a monthly report, I set up dashboards. The nice thing about a dashboard is that I can pick out just the pieces of information that are high level enough, or that really address the concerns that that customer typically has, without giving them access to the whole AdWords interface. Again, they're not AdWords experts, so you give them access to the interface. That could be a little scary. They could go and change things. They could actually mess things up by having access, by going into the account to do reporting. So I like to give them a real-time dashboard that shows them all that information. So final objection that I'm going to talk about here is, someone says, well, good, I believe in AdWords. I believe you know what you're doing, but my spend is really too small to justify me working with an agency. And there what I look at is, in the years that I've worked in AdWords, even in the last week, I've looked at 2 accounts of prospective new customers for myself, where I've seen this. Embrace yourselves. 1 campaign, 1 ad group, hundreds of keywords in that ad group, and they were actually doing a good job, because they had more than 10 different ad variations, but all in the same ad group. right? So the structure was just set up incorrectly, and you know what? They're wasting money when they do that. And so the point that I make to customers like this and to prospective customers is, yes, you can probably get an AdWords account started, but you're not going to structure it correctly. You're going to run into quality score issues. You're going to have costs that are too high. Let me set it up, someone who knows how to do it. I'll apply best practices. And you know what? My fees in the first month, you'll probably recoup them by not having done it wrong, right? By having a better quality score at the start, you're going to spend less money for clicks. And so that's how I justify working with an agency. And sometimes it is the case. You just really need to set them up correctly. Maybe log in once a quarter, maybe a couple times a year. Maybe their business is pretty simple. Maybe they don't need ongoing monthly maintenance. But there's still something to be said for at least taking a look at, are you using the latest features, right? If somebody hasn't logged in for a year, well, guess what? They probably don't have site links. Site links can boost your CTR by 30%, right? If you're not doing that, and especially now that it's part of the ranking formula, that's something you need to do to remain on the cutting edge of your business. And so make sure you're engaging agencies at least on a somewhat frequent basis to help save you money. So there's my contact information. You can email me. You can also follow me on Twitter. And now I think we'll see what kind of questions Ross has seen on the forum and the community.
Absolutely. Thanks to those who sent in questions to us on our event page. I think that was a really great presentation, Frederick. Really actionable insights that any agency or marketing professional can use. In particular, I think that there's a lot of businesses that have had bad experiences working with marketing professionals in the past, and for that reason, they don't come back. So I think that second slide on key objections about starting them fresh with a new account, giving them a really basic dashboard so that they're not overwhelmed by the terminologies is such a great suggestion, because that seems to be that's one thing that keeps coming up from what we've seen.
Good.
So we're going to go ahead and get started with Q&A. Our first question comes from Artie, and she wrote in and said that what her clients keep bringing up is return on investment. And you touched on it a little in your presentation, but one question that she has is how we can increase or instill confidence in clients that there is significant ROI from AdWords and that running a campaign can bring real results. So how would you, are there any other ways to address common concerns about ROI? Because that does come up a lot.
Yeah, that's a really good question, Artie. And so one thing that Google introduced fairly recently, just a couple of weeks ago, and I've only seen it in my own accounts for about a week now, but the flexible bid strategy of target return on advertising spend. Mm-hmm. So yeah, if you're looking for ROI, up until recently, you really had to bid on a cost per acquisition type basis, mm-hmm. which works well if you have lead gen business and you know every lead is worth $50. But if you're selling products or you're selling items of variable values, it's sometimes been somewhat challenging to deliver ROI because you didn't know what the ROI was. And now you can have a flexible bid strategy, and you can say, okay, Google target having a return on ad spend of 100%, 200%, and then they will automatically manage the bids to deliver that. I think the other point along the lines of ROI is that you do have to be somewhat patient when you're establishing that AdWords account in the beginning. And so I first started advertising on AdWords, I think it's like 12 years ago now. And basically, I blew through $2,000 with very little results. And most people would have said, you know, that's a waste of money, I give up. But what I had very purposely done is I was collecting as much data as possible. So I was using broad match keywords so that I could see what the actual search terms were. I was doing conversion tracking, so I understood which of those queries were giving me sales. And then at the end of wasting the $2,000, I said, well, let's look at the numbers. And then I found that handful of keywords that was really driving performance. And I said, for the next $2,000, I'm just going to keep those. And so it took me a little while to get to a break-even ROI in that case. But the point is you can always improve, right? Because you get all this data, you can really figure out what's working. And that's why it makes sense to have that ongoing relationship with an agency. Because if you just set it up, you know, no matter, and that, like, I know what I'm doing, right? But I set it up one way, and I still waste money on certain keywords and I can't predict what's going to work and what's not going to work. But it's the data that tells you, and it's me being in that account on an ongoing basis, and you guys being in the accounts every single day. That's going to help you really tweak the account to deliver the performance that you need.
Right. So checking in with the client, just showing them that you're constantly looking at those insights, those analytics, and then optimizing their account as you go.
Exactly.
Would be a really good idea.
Exactly.
Awesome. Our next question comes from Christian. And one common concern that Christian gets is businesses saying that working with an agency is a big waste of money, and that any big competitor to them can afford to hire a bigger agency than Christian's. So how would you address a client's concerns about whether that agency is capable of handling or producing as much impact as a bigger agency?
So that's a question from Christian. Okay, so Christian, have confidence in yourself. It's not because you're a small agency that you don't know what you're doing, right? I mean, I think, in fact, if you're a small agency or even a consultant, you're probably much better informed about what's happening than a large agency where, yeah, maybe the CEO and the founders really know what's going on, but they probably hire people who are straight out of school. They probably learn AdWords very quickly, but they don't have your expertise. So think about who's actually managing those accounts. I mean, that's really important. When I talk to my clients, they often ask, well, are you going to be working on the accounts? Or is somebody else going to be working on the accounts? And so it's figuring out what is that relationship, right? So I'm the guy who works on the strategy. I'll be in the accounts myself, but maybe it doesn't make sense for me to be hands-on adding new keywords every day. That's something somebody else can do. But it's about positioning you and your specific skills. That's one big thing. The other thing I would say is, and this depends on your agency, but some agencies work within one vertical, and so they have all of those learnings. They work with a ton of car dealerships, for example, and one great thing is looking at negative keywords, for example, right? You could look, if you deal with car dealerships, you find a negative keyword, well, guess what? You can apply that negative keyword to all of the accounts that you run. And so it's sort of that leverage that you have being an expert maybe in one industry, whereas the bigger agency maybe works with only one client in every vertical. So they don't have those cross-industry learnings that they can apply to the account. So those are two angles I would take.
Awesome. And that question actually came from Keith, not Christian.
Okay,
I'm sorry
Keith.
about the misread, is Keith. So then the next question, this is the actual question from Christian, has to do with clients saying that, a little bit similar to ROIs, that it can sometimes be a waste of money, and that they don't want to go back and use it again. So mostly because they tried setting up a campaign and they spent a lot of money on traffic that didn't convert, or that they thought might never convert. How would you address concerns about traffic conversion and making sure that?
Yeah, I mean, so Christian, if you have access to the account and you can see those keywords, my guess is they're probably broad match keywords. You go in and into the search query report and you showed that advertiser the list of, did you know you ran on this keyword that has nothing to do with your business because you picked something that was too broad? And look at how much money you spent on that. And so you whittle it down. I was just dealing with a customer last week, and they had one fairly broad keyword, spending a lot of money, and their CPA was, let's say, $25, right? And they said that's too high. But then I looked at the search query report, and I saw that on exact match. Actually, I looked at the match type segmentation in AdWords, and I saw that on exact match, that keyword was actually delivering conversions at a CPA of $7,
wow,
which was very good for them. And so I just went to them and I said, well, listen, if we move this keyword to an exact match, we can even increase the bid on it. We can get more coverage. We can get a higher position. And you're going to get great results. And so I think if you have the luxury of having that old account that you can look at, I mean, just break it down, right? Say, this is wrong with it, this is wrong with it, and this is how I'm going to fix it. And this is where the value clearly lies. So let's do more of that. Let's do less of what doesn't convert.
Thank you. The next question comes from Imran. And he said, any basic tips on setting up the dashboard? What's the best way?
Yeah, good question, Imran. So I think the dashboard, I have a couple of dashboards that I like. Oftentimes it depends on the client, though. So I'll always include high-level AdWords performance, showing them how many clicks, impressions, and conversions. If they have a specific campaign that they care about, you know, maybe it's the campaign that has their top keywords, maybe it's their brand keywords, I might include that as well. I certainly don't want to give them the whole list of every single campaign because, you know, I go pretty deep into the long tail, and so it's more data than they can handle, than they want to handle.
Right.
But it's really about having that conversation with the customer and saying, what do you care about? I have customers who care about phone calls, so then I certainly put on a little widget that says, here's how many phone calls you generated on a daily basis for each of these keywords. And then the other things I'll put on the dashboard is a couple of additional goodies around maybe SEO, social media marketing. If they have a Twitter handle, I'll usually put on their Twitter handle, and then they can see if people are tweeting them. So they kind of get that one nice dashboard view of their business and what people are saying and how that's maybe impacting their AdWords. And it could even provide an opportunity for an upsell. So when they come to me and they say, manage my AdWords, if I show them how their SEO and their social media is doing, maybe they start asking questions and they're like, well, AdWords seems good, but Twitter's not very active, so how do I get more engagement on that? And then that's something I can sell to them.
Right. And our next question comes from Justin on setting up templates for any emails or guidance that they can send out monthly.
Oh yeah, definitely set up templates. I mean, if you're manually putting together an email, that's just a lot of work. And like I covered in my presentation last time, the moment we have to do anything manually, we sort of start hating our jobs, right? Because it's the same type of a report you're putting together for potentially tens, hundreds of clients. So yeah, set up a template. And most of the third-party systems, they will let you set up some sort of a template. The way I approach that is I do sort of my base level. So everybody wants to see top-level AdWords stats. Everybody wants to see how many conversions they got. But then some advertisers, again, care about one particular campaign. So I'll augment the template with that one piece of data. So I have a template that I save that I apply to all of my new customers. And then when a new customer comes in and they have some particular needs, then I change that template around slightly. But I at least am starting from a baseline that I don't have to rebuild from scratch every single time. And then I automate it too, right? So once I've got the template for each of those customers, I put it on a cycle where it emails out once a week, once a month, whatever they're asking for.
Great. Our last question comes from Robbie, and he often gets questions from clients saying, how much does this all cost? His common answer is, the great thing about AdWords is that you only pay for it when someone clicks your ad. Is there another response that you would recommend for a client?
Yeah, I mean, so that's a good question, right? You only pay for the clicks that you get, and you control the cost per click. I think oftentimes the question of how much does it cost also kind of goes at what is my monthly starting budget, and I think there it's important to really highlight the fact that you're in charge. If you only want to do $100 a day, only $50 a day, that's fine. I do ask them to be willing to put some money towards testing, right? And that's like my example where I spent $2,000 to get the data. I could have probably gotten the data with less money, but you need to ask for some level of commitment from that customer that says, we're going to need to spend $1,000 in that first month, and we may not get you that positive ROI from the start. But here's the plan, here's the strategy. What we're doing with that $1,000 is we're collecting the data on what works, what doesn't work. And then the second month, we're going to start improving results, and in a couple of months, we're going to have great results. So when I work with a customer, I typically say 3-month minimum commitment before you're going to start seeing results, because anything shorter than that, depending on how big your business is, how much money you're spending on a monthly basis, it can be hard to get those numbers that quickly. But that's how I address cost concerns.
All right. Thank you, Frederick. That concludes our Q&A. Remember to check the Partners Community page for updates, fill out our feedback form, and hashtag Ask the Expert if you have any additional questions. Thank you, guys.